regular meeting for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023. And our first item is the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 2 is roll call. I am going to, let's see. So we'll start up there. Alan Hardy is not here. Tucson Sarion is not here. David McDowell is not here. Paul Beck.
Present.
Belinda Higuera.
Here.
Vaughn
Boyinger.
Boyinger.
It's only been a year, don't worry
Right.
about it.
I am sorry. I will get it.
We'll get it
Vaughn
next year.
Boyinger.
I'm here.
Boyinger is here. Melanie Findling is also here. Item number 3 is public comments. This is a time set aside for residents to address the Planning Commission on matters that are not on this evening's regular agenda. Do we have anybody, nobody's here in our audience, do we have anybody queued up in the, on the web?
Yes.
We have a hand raised?
Nope.
We do not, so I'm going to move on then to our Planning Commission business. Item number 4, this is our consent agenda, and we haven't had one of these for a while, but basically, without any comments or discussions, we can go ahead and approve these if we'd like. If there's anything that somebody wants to pull off the agenda to discuss, we could do that. As I mentioned, we actually can move to approve meeting minutes even if we did not attend. So commissioners, does anybody have a feeling about any of these minutes, if we need to take them off the consent agenda, or can we go ahead? Okay, so then I would need a motion.
I move to approve the April 18th, March 21st, February 28th, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
We have a second from Vaughn Boyinger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. The consent agenda passes unanimously. Then we have item number 5, which is the main reason for our getting together this evening, our Mount Shasta 2023 to 2031 Housing Element Public Review Draft. And I am going to hand this off to staff to get us started, and then we have our Plan West partners who are going to help us out with this. So go ahead, Todd. Do you want to introduce us?
Where's Kyle Rathbun?
Yeah, sure. We have Vanessa Blodgett and Michelle Nielsen joining us from Plan West. And if you may recall from the last Planning Commission hearing, we're under a deadline to meet HCD's deadline, essentially, that we need to get it to the City Council for approval. Just a reminder that this process, the majority of what we have in this housing element is what's required by the state. Even when the City Council approves this or recommends this to be sent to HCD, that begins at least a year-long back and forth with HCD, where they then tell us what we have to have in our housing element to be compliant. So a lot of this, it's good to get input from the public. It's absolutely essential, but it doesn't end there. If HCD doesn't thinks that we have not complied, there's more information that we need to add, they will tell us, and that's not up for debate. So, do you guys want to take it?
Yes. Thanks, Todd, and thanks for having us back this evening. And so in your packet and staff report, we did try to go into some level of detail to respond to the comments both that we heard at the last Planning Commission meeting and then from public comments that at that meeting and that were after that emailed to us as well. So we have tried our best to respond to those, and then the other thing that was also included in the packet and posted on the website, the city's website, is a track changes, so underline strikeout version of proposed revisions to the draft that was previously released to address the comments. And then what will be moved forward to the council for a consideration to then recommend that the city then submit it to HCD, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, for, you know, review of the draft, which then, as Todd mentioned, HCD will review, and they have a 90-day review period. Then we'll send the city a letter, and hopefully not too long, just addressing anything that, you know, they see that needs to be updated or revised to comply with state housing element law. And then that draft is revised and then brought back to Planning Commission and City Council for the final adoption. And so I think we do have a short presentation just to summarize and highlight some of the changes that we made, and then we're happy to answer any additional questions that the commission has. So Michelle, I think if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can get into our presentation and then take comments both during and or after that.
Current. Okay.
Great. And then Michelle, I think, yeah, go ahead and I will take us through. So this is just a review of the chapters, and then we are going to highlight some of the changes chapter by chapter. Overall, we did try to fix some of the typos and other grammar things that we found when we read through it again, and then we will discuss some of the other changes that we made. The next slide. And these are the appendices. So we did update some discussion in the Appendix A, the very large and long Appendix A. The needs assessment, we will get into the housing sites inventory and the updates that we have made there. And then we're not going to get into any, you know, the just typo and other grammar updates in the other appendices. We did in Appendix E add the community comments that we have received. So we added those in there as well. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, I think, to get into this first section.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you again for having us. And so just briefly to go over, as Vanessa mentioned, throughout the document, we caught some typos that were raised, pointed out to us by the commission and the public, and tried our best to reword the language where it was found that may have been confusing. And then getting into Chapter 2, there was a edit to Program 1.3, which are 1.33, just correcting the timing from 5 years to 1 year to match what is Table 2.2. Table 2.2, as you may recall, identifies the city's priority program. These are programs that are to implement state law that have been in place for quite a while. This program specifically relates to the city preparing written procedures that prioritize.
Could you hold on just a moment? We've got the train
Sure.
going by. It's a little loud. There, I think that'll be better now, thanks.
Okay. So there's a state law that for an affordable housing development, if it includes for units that are affordable to lower income units through like a deed restriction. So subsidized units. Jurisdictions across the state are to prioritize water and sewer connections for that development. So this program is just to just the city to prepare written procedures that would memorialize its current practice, which is to adhere to state law when these come up. We also added references to program HO 2.35 regarding junior accessory dwelling units to clarify that those provisions are not exclusive to accessory dwelling units. They include junior accessory dwelling units. And to complement that, we added the definition of what is a junior accessory dwelling unit to Appendix D to make that easier for folks to locate and to understand what that is. Chapter 3, it was brought to our attention that we had the number of units in the Carmen Drive development incorrect, so that's been corrected. Make my slide go. In the process of going through preparing the presentation, found an error of this program, this new correction. There is no program HO 2.26. So this slide just illustrates, the recommendation to strike that program since it doesn't exist. There's probably just a typo on my part. Appendix A, again, there was numerous typos and some corrections throughout that appendix. We confirmed the information shared with us by the Planning Commission that the Rockefeller House is no longer operating, so we've struck reference to that throughout Appendix A. After the Planning Commission meeting, we had a conversation with the previous property manager of Alder Gardens, and so there's a little bit of information about that that's been added. That property apparently has changed hands. We added summaries about mandatory programs, SB 9, SB 35, and the Housing Crisis Act, which is a new one as a result of new information that an alert that was sent out by HCD. Let's see, we added information, a summary about that water and sewer priority to, supplement that program that we were talking about earlier, and then formatting revisions as well. And then we had some good questions, and we provided responses. These, I think, are either you can find them in the document or the staff report that accompany the document. Information to clarify the HUD income data that is presented in Appendix A. It was table A13 versus the area median income data. And so what we found and what's presented in the staff report is the HUD income data is the result of households in the city of Mount Shasta completing the census surveys or participating in the American Community Surveys, whereas the area median income, AMI, is a benchmark used to measure and determine eligibility for assisted housing projects. So it's used as a benchmark, a metric to measure if someone is eligible. So that's the difference. And so that also, there was a question about why there was such a big difference between the HUD income data and the area median income data. There's a provision in state law that when a county's area median income data is less than the California non-metropolitan median income data, HCD, in accordance with state law, they bring it up and match it to California's non-metropolitan income data that is determined by HUD. And so there's lots of references if folks want to look into that some more, but that was, there's more information about that. We also added definitions for the types of housing in Table A21 because it wasn't clear what a attached single-family residence was versus a two-unit attached unit. There was some, it was confusing, understandable as to what those were. So we added some clarification definitions about that in the housing element. And what it really comes down to is do the units have shared plumbing and heating systems? If they had shared plumbing and heating systems, then they are considered, they're not considered an individual unit. They're classified in a 2 to 4 unit, whereas if they have their own individual plumbing and heating systems, and maybe they just share a wall, then they are a single family attached unit. And there was a request for some clarification on the setbacks for a number of the residential zoning districts. So we went back and double checked all that, re-verified that, and confirmed that. And in the staff report on it's page 4 on mine. It's number 3. There's the table references, so if someone wants to go and take a look at all those. So Appendix B, which I think I'm going to hand this off to Vanessa to go over the summary of the revisions and response to comments. This is the city's inventory of sites.
Yes, thanks, Michelle. So as Michelle just said, it is the sites inventory, and there are a couple of clarifications that were made in addition to identifying some options for the commission and the city to consider moving forward and identify to HCD. So I'll just start with some of the clarifications. One is just to clarify the level of review of environmental constraints for the housing element is not meant to be site specific, and it will not constitute, environmental clearance or an approval of any development on a specific site. But it is just kind of a high level review to look at, based on available information, any known environmental constraints on those sites. So we did try to clarify that in the discussion. And then just a brief discussion about emergency shelter maximum resident occupancy standards from reference to the city's code. And then as a note, there are, per government code section 65583, the city is going to need to do an amendment to their code related to emergency shelters, kind of in parallel as the housing element's going through. Before HCD will certify the housing element, they will require the city to have their ordinance updated for the policies related to emergency shelters, which we will be coming back to you and with more information about that. But just kind of as a heads up, that will be coming through as HCD is reviewing the housing element itself. And then getting into the actual regional housing needs allocation sites, and that we have identified, and as was brought up and discussed last time, the preferred site is the Mountain Townhome site, which was approved during the 6th cycle housing element. So we have, as we indicated last time, reached out to HCD, and we haven't got their final okay, but we're pretty confident that HCD will accept it as this cycle's site for accommodating the city's RENA. We found some other examples similar situations. So this is our recommendation for the preferred site, is the Mountain Townhomes, which more than accommodates the city's need for this cycle. We did identify in table B2 some other optional sites. And Michelle, I guess if we want to, we mapped them just so the commission could see them. And there are various, challenges to some of the other sites just not being, having, potential vegetation that could be wetlands that we, without a site-specific study, you know, it's hard to tell. They're not that close to services. They would be across the freeway. And so, Michelle, if you want to bring up the next slides, I think the maps are the next slides. We can kind of go through them. So, Mountain Townhome site, that is the one that is outlined in the orange. That's the preferred site. The other ones identified here. So 2 of them are across Highway 5 from a majority of the services. The other ones are relatively small and with unknown potential constraints. And for the criteria to meet a site for the regional housing needs assessment, they do have to be between 0.5 acres and no larger than 10 acres. It has to have access to public water and sewer, either currently or within the next 8 years, or the housing element timeframe. And then they have to be zoned to allow for multifamily residential development by right with a minimum density of 15 dwelling units per acre. So the sites have to meet all of those criteria to be considered. And so these are the sites that kind of met that standard. And then there's a couple more. So the next slide shows one up in northern part of the city. And we were unsure about services up in that area. And then there's one in the southern portion of the city. And we did just want to identify these to the commission in case we need them, but our recommendation is to kind of have them in the city's back pocket, I guess, and present the Mountain Townhome site to HCD when it's submitted to them, and then, you know, we feel like that it's likely to be approved, and if not, we have these other sites that could work as well. And I think that's it about the sites. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or we do have a couple more slides just about next steps, which I did a brief overview at the beginning, and then we can have additional questions. Michelle, anything to add, I guess, about the sites?
Sorry, it took me a bit to find my unmute button. No, not at this point. But yes, we did find new information about from another locality and some others that indicate that the Mountain Townhome sites would likely be accepted by HCD to meet the city's RENA based on the affordability, and that those units, how the assistance that the developer is using to construct those units and the affordability requirements would meet the city's extremely low income and low income requirements, and that the entitlement was approved by your planning commission earlier this year, but that action occurred prior to the adoption and within the 6th cycle. So the indicators are very good. So that was some good information to find. So I don't have anything further to add at this point, though. So
great.
Hey guys, can I ask one clarifying question? What does HCD say about sites in proximity to transit and other services, like being able to walk to, grocery stores, et cetera?
So there are requirements as part of your sites analysis that your site is, or sites are affirmatively furthering fair housing. And part of that is consideration access to transit and services especially for units that are more affordable and in proximity to other resources in the community. Those are definitely a factor. So that's another positive for the Mountain Townhome site, is it does have that proximity, whereas some of the other sites it might be a little more difficult to make those arguments just given where they're located. But so that's why we're optimistic about the mountain townhomes. That's another reason it's has another positive attribute.
Just make sure that we touch that. And it sounds like really good news about the RETA goals for this cycle.
Great, and I think the next slide is just the next steps. And so once the city council authorizes submittal to HCD, there is a 10-day period where we consider and incorporate any public comments that were either from the council or the community at that meeting. Then it's submitted to HCD for the 90-day review period. And then based on the HCD letter that the city received, any revisions that are needed are made, and then it is brought back to the Planning Commission to recommend adoption to the council. And then after that, it's resubmitted to HCD for a final review to make sure the adopted version does comply with state law. And so they have 60 days to make that determination. And in our experience, you know, it's pretty typical for a city to get another letter after that, identifying some minor revisions that are needed to be made, which if they're not substantial revisions, can be made without having to go back through the whole adoption process again, or hearing process, if the city desires. And then it's if revisions are required at that point, it's resubmitted, and the process with HCD kind of continues until they find it in compliance. And I think that's it. So now we're happy to take any comments and questions.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Commissioners, Paul, anything from you? Belinda?
Yes. I would like a little clarity on this new Housing Crisis Act, since how it's brand new, and I don't understand what they mean by crises. I mean, what is that? It's brand new, so I think everybody could stand to know what it means.
Yeah, sure. It's the legislation was passed I believe, was in 2019, and the state, based on the census data, they issued a list at that point in time. I think it was circa 2019, so maybe it went into effect in the beginning of the year, where cities and counties of a certain size that had urbanized areas, by and large, were listed as affected cities. And what it does is, for affected cities and counties, is it does limit the certain zoning-related actions that can be taken, down zoning, imposing new moratoriums on development, adopting new non-objective design standards, and that sort of thing. And earlier this month, HCD, in response to the U.S. Census, in accordance with the provisions of the statute, they reissued an affected cities and counties list. And previously, the previous list, Mount Shasta was not included on, but they are now included. About 94% of California cities are now included. Also, some counties were added that previously were not included. And so basically what it does is it kind of hamstrings like certain actions that are that would limit housing development, and then for qualifying housing developers that have a qualifying project, they can submit what's a preliminary application. And if they meet all the requirements of this preliminary application, which is pretty extensive, has like components of it related almost to like a CEQA checklist. And if they actually meet all those requirements and have a project that's eligible, it kind of locks in their development standards, but they still have obligations they have to meet.
So it's more restrictive and less restrictive, kind of? It's like it is that kind of, I'm getting the feeling that you can't say, not in my backyard, if you're one of these housing crisis places.
Yeah,
Right.
if it's for a certain type of project, it does kind of makes more barriers for, makes it harder to say no for a certain type of project if the developer goes through the process.
And why did we qualify? Because we are successfully, or our urban areas, why did we qualify for this?
Yeah, there was a change in the U.S. Census, the census designated places for the urbanized areas for Mount Shasta as a result of the 2020 census. I'm not sure if it was a change in their methodology, but there's kind of like the main part of Mount Shasta, the part that's east of I-5 and kind of where your downtown area is within this urbanized area for the U.S. Census, and your population is greater than 5,000 in the urban cluster. So that's how the city qualified. There was a lot of jurisdictions added to the list locally, or just kind of across the hill, if you will. Humboldt County was added to the list. They previously were not added, but they were not part of the list, but they are now added. So.
Okay, and I have another that's in the same general concern of understanding this stuff about the not having any architectural oversight on projects of certain kinds. And if I'm reading that correctly, does that mean like you could build a concrete block
No.
Soviet-era building, shall we say?
No. I read it very closely because I know for Mount Shasta, the character of the city and its vision, how it sees itself is really important. Its new design standards, if you adopted new design standards that were not objective, then you wouldn't be able to enforce them. If you keep them as they are and don't add on for residential development, you can still use those. They're not set aside. So I looked at that, like I read it in several places in the state law, yeah.
Okay, well, that's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah.
And then on, I found a typo, one.
What? Just
Which,
what?
and you did so good, and I am not very good at this typo stuff, so I don't know why it stood out, but it's on the, program HO 2.5.2, number 1, it's just not capitalized. The explicitly is just not capitalized. One up on
Thank
you,
you.
Melanie. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Melinda. Hey, Vaughn, what have you got for us?
Oh, I just can't top that. I think we'll just leave it be on my end. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to say I appreciate the thoroughness with which you went through the document and how responsive you were to our comments and questions. And I just have a couple things. One is on program HO-2.2.1, when you talk about the city wanting to improve community awareness and support for city housing programs, I just wondered if we would also want to add junior ADUs to that we would encourage people to be aware of them? Or if you left it out because ADU is an umbrella term for a junior ADU, and I didn't know if you intentionally excluded junior ADUs or your thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, that definitely was not intentional to exclude junior ADUs. I thought I'd searched on ADUs, but obviously I missed that one. So we will double back on find all those ADUs because it definitely, junior ADUs are definitely within and intended to be included in that program. So thank you for that.
Sure. Well, then that does lead me to wonder if, I mean, I understand you added the definition in the glossary at the end. I wondered if perhaps it may be important enough to add it to 7.0 key definitions and acronyms?
Yep.
Thinking along those same lines?
Yeah,
To just elevate it
Yeah.
yeah.
for folks to know that it's an option and something that we would encourage. Okay, lovely, thank you. And the other question I had has to do with SB 9 and Table A-54. And if I understand a little bit how SB 9 works, duplexes could be built in R1 districts, and in the table, that isn't evident. And I understand they're excluded in high fire risk zones, but we have enough potential. When I looked at the map you created showing all the potential residential building lots, we have quite a few that aren't in the high risk. So I'm wondering why that table doesn't note that you could put a duplex in the R1.
Table B.
Table A, on A54, table A54. Do you know which one, you want to peek at that?
Yeah, let me take a gander. Sorry. So I think what I wrote in table A54.
So do you see
So I
it's,
think, yeah, I do. So what this reflects would be if you like looked at like what the Mount Shasta Municipal Code says is what the residential uses that are categorized here is what's reflected in this table. But you are correct that yes, SB 9, where for a qualifying project on a qualifying site, they would be eligible, they could do a duplex. So we could make that clearer in that table A54 to join them together and make that connection for the public to better understand. And we could add a footnote to maybe make that clearer.
Yeah, because SB 9 projects are very specific in the criteria and then, you know, what they allow and moving forward kind of timeframes. So this table, as Michelle said, you know, is saying what's in the current zoning code. And we can add that as a footnote, but it is, you know, it's an add-on kind of that is considered as a separate process.
I think that would help, so that if you were just to look at this and didn't do a deeper dive, you would think, oh, well, it's not allowed at all. Where I think some, like you're saying, a footnote or an asterisk under the duplex column under the R1s would let people know that that is an option under certain conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be super helpful. Otherwise,
Okay.
it looks like it's prohibited, which I don't
Okay.
think we want that to be the case.
Right.
Okay, well, that's all for me. Let's see if, anything else, commissioners? Or I'm going to open it up and see, has anybody expressed an interest in providing comment this evening online? Is there a hand up?
No hands.
Nothing. Well, what do you know?
Oh, we got a hand. Johanna.
Johanna, okay. Let's go ahead and invite Johanna to speak to us this evening.
Hi, good evening. thank you for all those great updates. And one thing I wanted to comment, well, two things. I have some typos as well that I don't believe were included in the previous slides, but more importantly, there's an RHNA parcel 057071-40. This has wetlands on it, both officially and unofficially. So officially, it has waters of the U.S. and wetlands as designated in the letters that I've previously sent in. And unofficially, you can look at the picture that I sent with all the perennial creeks. In the letter that I sent, there was a picture that has water running through the entire parcel, and you can see the rivers. Those are called perennial creeks and are considered wetlands. And although they have not been officially identified by the US ACE, they are part of all the wetlands that surround the project on Pine Street and on Cedar Street. So I would ask that you remove this as a backup option because, and including, it was on the slide that you showed earlier. So I would ask that you remove that because that would not be an appropriate RHNA site. And then as for typos, actually the very first sentence I think is missing an in the sentence. And then there's some quotes in blue font, which I don't know if you meant to have them in a blue font, and I can email those to you about attainment of decent housing. And in section 7.0, multifamily is not defined. I don't know if that's a typo, but it seems to me that multifamily is referenced in the document in there, and it seems that would be a good definition. And the PDF page number 309 still references Pine Street parcels ending in 010 and 020, and those should be removed to be consistent with the other updates that were made. And I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. Has anybody else expressed an interest in joining us this evening?
Not as of this moment.
Okay. I think then, commissioners, do we have any other comments, questions?
We should close the public hearing.
Okay, well, we'll close. Yeah, we'll close the public hearing, and I don't know if we are officially a public hearing. Okay, the public hearing.
Comments, public comments.
Or is it comments? Right. The public comments, we are done with the public comments, and
Just close the-
commissioners, do we have any additional comments or questions of staff or anything else to discuss? Are we ready to send this off to City Council as with a few
Typos.
a few typos, a few clarifications that it sounds like they've noted? Okay. Do we have a motion?
So what is there? So we make a motion
Yes.
Please.
to receive the staff report, receive and consider the comments from the public, and provide staff direction and recommend that the City Council authorize that the 2331 Housing Element Update Public Review Draft be submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development to review.
We have a motion
I'll
from
s-
Belinda. We have
Second.
a second from Paul. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for putting together our housing element. We appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
all your
Thank you.
efforts on that.
Thanks, Vanessa and Michelle.
Pleasure working with you guys, you ladies.
Yes, you as well, and we will be back for adoption. So not rid of us yet.
See you soon.
You'll see us soon.
There you go.
Good night.
All right, good night. All right, item number 6, commission and staff comments. Commissioners, any comments? Bon?
None.
Belinda?
What's happening at Roseburg, all the trucks and stuff that are happening? Everybody keeps asking me like I know something,
Yeah,
so,
they think something's going on. I was asked over the weekend
yeah.
myself.
So Todd, that's your,
Yeah. So there is a project underway that council approved for thinning along the outskirts of the landing property and thinning on the orchard property to make sure that we are ready for fire season and to address some of the complaints of adjoining property owners that you know, they're concerned about, you know, rightfully about defensible space, and they're concerned that they might lose their, you know, their fire insurance. And I don't know if this is going to help them in that regard, but we're doing our best to make sure that we aren't the cause of the problem.
So it's thinning,
Fuels project?
fuels project.
Yeah, it's to get you know, chipping and mastication, and then removal of bigger pieces and getting it out of there and getting it to a place where we can get it to, you know, very small size and turn it into fertilizer.
Yeah, okay,
Wow,
Thanks.
lovely. Anything else?
that's it.
Paul, comments? Questions?
No, no.
Okay. None for me. Todd, any comments you'd like to share with us?
No, I mean, it's not really planning commission related. We're
Oh, I
heavily
do have one.
getting into, oh, you do?
Well, go ahead. You can finish, Todd, and then
Yeah.
I won't forget.
Yeah, we're just heavily into overextended into trying to get some grants in, you know, for to help us pay for a more sophisticated library expansion, for us to pay for 3 important drainage projects using federal funds that are close to failing, and they're very expensive, and I can't see another way to pay for them, but I think we've got a good shot. And a couple other things in the works that we've got to get in within the next 2 weeks. So on top of everything else in budget season, it's quite busy.
Wow, lovely. Paul?
Yeah, so I think it was last fall when the proponents for the Summit Lofts project came and asked us to put the hurry up on the approval so they could get everything finished, and nothing's happening. I don't see any businesses in there. We're not exacting any revenue from any businesses.
Well, they've got guests staying in
No,
the
no,
hotel.
downstairs is
Oh,
all.
downstairs.
There were 3 functioning businesses in there that had to move and find other places, and that thing's been, the windows have been papered up and nothing's happening. And so I'm just wondering why it was such an urgency, because they quote unquote had a bundle of money into it and nothing's going on.
So there is, I guess I can say this. There is a well-known down in Reading, and I'll put my bias in here, some of the best coffee I've ever had, and bakery going into, if you've been down to Reading and have seen Theory Coffee Roasters, they're going into that space. Negotiations have taken a little longer than planned, but I just got a text from April and Josh LaFrance, the property developers and owners, and they've gotten the kinks worked out and they're moving full speed ahead.
All 3 units?
Downstairs in the front on the Mount Shasta Boulevard frontage?
Yeah.
Okay. Any projection for when that might happen? By July 4th, perhaps, or?
They didn't give me that window. I know that they wanted to be under construction about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
I can get that information. I can text Josh and April
We'll
tomorrow morning.
talk about it maybe next meeting or whatever.
I'll definitely have the schedule.
Okay,
Next.
great, thank you, that's it for me.
And the same with the laundromat, does that have a ETA of when it might open?
Oh, that's
It's crippling, that's a crippling thing to not have a laundromat.
It
I
is.
don't know.
I don't know, the last time that I spoke to my building inspector about that project was a week and a half ago. And he said that all his issues, that being the building inspector's issues, had been addressed, and
Okay,
that project's moving forward. Again, I don't know their schedule.
yeah, I just was hoping that at least our part in it
You know,
was moving forward.
back to Summit Lofts, wasn't there supposed to be a patio to the
Oh, yeah.
side of the building? And
Yes.
I haven't seen that either.
Yep, I haven't been, that's not something I've been paying attention to, but I'll check.
Yeah, good call there, I'm glad you remembered that.
Optional.
Well, right.
Well, it would just add to the front of
Maybe when
the
the
building with the city,
bakery
when you
opens
would just drive up there, it'd kind of be kind of a cool thing
Well, yeah,
to see that,
it
give it a
was
little
supposed to be a
more.
part of that project. That
Yeah,
was what
exactly.
we approved that, so.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, item 7, future agenda items. Anything we should know coming up?
Well, yeah, how about this? We had a lag time, as you know, with Kyle leaving and getting very short notice, and I was in Hawaii and got the email, like, okay. So I interviewed a couple of their interim planners, and we have somebody that's a little more experienced, a little bit more, has more presence. At the same time, we have 7 applicants for the planning commission, or the planner role for the city. One may qualify for planning manager. There are, so in there, mostly I would say 6 of them are new grads or limited experience. There's one that seems very solid, who's been doing affordable housing projects and has worked in planning and development. Fairly new person, and another person has a long career in planning. She's been working in private planning, and as well as has run some offices in California and in Idaho. And so and we have a guy that's from the Netherlands that is really interesting. He's a new grad. My concern, but I still want to interview him, is his cover letter and resume were very theoretical, and he's clearly very bright, but there's the sheen of, just not quite understanding yet what it actually means at the local level, as opposed to, the theory of it. And so we want to just find out more about this, and does he understand that, that transition, and it's good to keep those ideals, but there's also the reality of day to day. So our human resources person is setting up interviews. We're trying to get the 3 people interviewed next Tuesday, and we'll see what happens.
All right, nice.
Great news.
Long drive.
Hopefully.
Also,
hopefully-
I just want to say that a couple of situations I know of, like when our former planner came, she was pretty green. She had a little bit under her belt. And I know when I worked on the land trust, the gal there was real green, and she's still there as the ED or whatever title she is. They were both young women that started, but they were smart. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Were you
so
talking about our
from
three?
that standpoint, sometimes younger isn't so set in their
No.
ways, I just I don't know who good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. And yes, and so I'm trying to weigh those two. And were you referring to our just previous planner or the planner before that? Okay.
No, not Juliana,
Yeah.
not the, yeah,
Not touching the,
not Kyle.
yeah. She's very motivated, and she is like, I don't know when she sleeps. And
Yeah.
she's just like she's smart. I've met very few people that are as motivated as she is.
Yeah, and
And,
hard to get that again, but nevertheless,
My fingers crossed.
Mine too, then.
both of them.
Yes, yeah, no doubt.
Okay, any other planning things coming ahead? No projects, anything that's going to need our attention?
I haven't seen anything come through, but again, there's been this weird void of 3 weeks where I don't know if projects are piling up. Usually I hear about them, and I haven't seen anything.
Are we going to work on a noise ordinance ever? So
Not till
can
we have a planner.
Yeah.
Paul's asking if we'll work on our noise ordinance someday, again.
And the parklets.
Because that's prevented us from having live music in certain areas of town.
So how do I say this without sounding like, so we had LEAP grant funds, which are for affordable housing, And somehow we were able, before my time here, to get that money reprogrammed for doing a noise study. And our previous planner went and canceled that study and severed that contract without letting anybody know until after the fact. So we need to figure out how to start from scratch.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Darn. Okay, anything else?
Okay.
Commissioners? Todd?
Good.
Are we good? Okay, I'm going to adjourn our Tuesday, May 16th, 2023 regular Planning Commission meeting. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thank you all.
your contributions.
Thanks.
All right. Early night.
Okay, Von Boyinger. Von Boyinger, I'm going to remember your name
Boyinger.
forever.
Write it down.
I did.